We have been hearing a lot of talk about asymmetric warfare recently, related to the current US-Israel war on Iran. When Iran suddenly found itself attacked by the mighty militaries of the US and Israel, all seemed doomed. Everyone expected it to be a walkover for US and Israel. A few days at max is what President Trump predicted. And according to simple calculations of the relative military strengths of the opposing sides, it should have been an easy win. But all the calculations were based on the assumption that Iran would fight on the same traditional terms of the US-Israel alliance. But Iran approached it from a completely different standpoint. One in which damage to property and personnel were not the only factors. They added the factor of economic cost, not only to the US-Israel alliance, but to the entire world. In so doing, it shifted a local battlefield, Middle East, to a worldwide one, and forced countries that were not consulted and would normally stand on the sidelines to become vocal about the effects the war was having on them all over the world. In stepped asymmetric warfare. Not unknown and certainly used in the past, but a war that is almost impossible to predict with any certainty. But this is Holy Week. In fact, today is Good Friday, and asymmetric warfare takes on a whole new meaning in this context. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, says that Christianity is an invasion of enemy territory. Christianity is the story of how the rightful king has landed in the skies and is calling us all to take part in a great campaign of sabotage. It is the ultimate asymmetric war. Just as in the Old Testament, the battle between David and Goliath was an example of asymmetric warfare. When David stepped up to be the champion for the Israelites and to face an enemy clearly mightier than he was, he entered an asymmetric war. He could not hope to match Goliath on his terms, with spears and swords and armor. That would be futile, and both sides knew this. When Jesus came quietly into this world to overthrow the apparent prince of this world, that is Satan, he entered an asymmetric war. He knew no amount of violence or anger or revenge could defeat evil, because that is exactly what evil feeds on. And every act of violence or anger or revenge only strengthens it. Like David, Jesus, the new David, found Satan's Achilles heel. He brought in a new factor, inaccessible to Satan and impossible to defeat. He brought in love. He knew without a doubt that Satan can have no answer to this. He knew that violence exhausts itself against unrelenting peace, that anger, hate, and revenge fades away in front of true love. It is the ultimate Tai Chi or Aikido move, to absorb the incoming force until it expends itself, and then turn it around on itself to its own demise. Just as Adam was the first representative of humanity and gave in to evil, David was the prefigurement of Jesus, the eternal King. His battle with Goliath in the valley of Elah was a prefigurement of the battle of Calvary. Jesus is mankind's true champion, who has defeated evil convincingly. He has shown us the technique to defeat evil and sin in our lives. More than this, he continues to give us himself, so that united to him, we are invincible. It is not that he has exterminated evil. Satan still exists, and mankind is always free to choose evil. And to various extents, we all do at one time or another. The really lasting victory is that we can choose to have him guide us in this battle. We can choose to acknowledge that he is our invincible leader and follow his plan and his example. But more than this, he lives in us. And so not only do we have the battle plan, we have the invincible champion living in us. So the only way we can possibly lose is in our arrogance to ignore his guidance, to form our own army and hope to win using weapons that only make our enemy stronger. In fact, the only way we can lose is to concede defeat and join the enemy, to become subject to his will and commands. The choice is stark: victory with Jesus or defeat and submission to Satan. It should be an easy choice, except that victory requires a complete trust in the asymmetric war plan. It requires being unafraid of the many attacks that will come our way, the many apparent injuries we will sustain. But these injuries are superficial. They all are against our body. Our spiritual core remains intact and unshaken. As Jesus himself taught us in Matthew chapter 10, verse 28, do not fear those who can kill your body, but cannot kill your soul. And again, in Mark's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 35, whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. The choice is clear. It is not easy, but it is clear. It will mean discomfort, sometimes severe suffering, maybe even death. But it is really the only way to win this asymmetric war. Thank you, and God bless.